Bernie Sanders is the first Jewish candidate to win a presidential primary in the US, and he also describes himself as a democratic socialist. Our Will Ripley decided to explore the roots of Sanders' political beliefs and found they may have been shaped in part by his travels there. He joins us now from Jerusalem. Will, what did you find when you toured this area that Bernie Sanders spent some time in many years ago?
It's really interesting, Lynda, and obviously there's been a lot of speculation, Lynda, about the fact that Bernie Sanders could possibly be the first Jewish American president, and he has mentioned repeatedly that he spent time on an Israeli kibbutz, a small communal farming community back in the early 1960s, but he was always vague about exactly where it was. And so an Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, dug through the archives, and they found an old article identifying this particular kibbutz up north, about 2 hours from here, near the city of Haifa. So we decided to drive up. And what we found are really a lot of real-life examples of the policies that Bernie Sanders is now advocating in the United States.
Could this be the birthplace of Bernie Sanders' socialism? Don't be fooled by all the green or how most people get around. Shar HaMakim is no golf course community. It's a kibbutz, a socialist settlement near Haifa in northern Israel. Albert Eli, a kibbutznik for almost 60 years.
Everything belongs to everybody.
In Israel's early days, collective farms were a cornerstone of this society. Neighbors looked after the land, sharing profits equally.
This is socialism.
Yeah, that was once communism. Today is socialism. Call it whatever you want.
This kibbutz modeled after the communist ideals of the former Soviet Union. For decades, people from all over the world volunteered to live, work, and study here, including an American in the early 60s whose name stuck out.
The only thing that I remember is I said, how can an American call himself Bernard? It's a French name.
Eli doesn't recognize Bernie Sanders, seen here in his early 20s. The self-described democratic socialist has long said he traveled to a kibbutz, but has been vague on exactly where he volunteered. But Israeli newspaper Haaretz dug up a 1990 interview with Sanders, who claimed he spent several months here in 1963. Back then, Eli was in charge of dozens of volunteers who came to labor and learn about socialism.
We spoke, and maybe that had an influence on him.
The work was simple: growing crops, raising cattle.
But what do you make of the fact that someone who very likely was here with you as a volunteer is now a candidate for president of the United States?
I'm happy. I hope we'll change things. Not for me. I'm too old. For the rest of the people.
Today, the kibbutz makes most of its money producing solar water heaters. But volunteers from overseas stopped coming a decade ago. When they left, business dried up at the old pub, now closed. These days, only rusty reminders of a place where young idealists like Sanders once gathered, sharing drinks and dreams of changing the world.
And so this kibbutz, these were really critical in the early years of Israel, because you had immigrants from all over the world coming here. They didn't speak the same language, but they learned together, they worked together, and this really is credited with kind of helping to build this sense of community and society here in Israel. So Lynda, you can see what may have attracted Bernie Sanders, who has identified himself as a democratic socialist, to a community such as this, where one of their key points is to try to take care of the poor in the community and lift them up and make sure that everyone is taken care of equally. Lynda?
Yeah, certainly fascinating to look at his background. Will Ripley, thank you very much for that report. Well, live from CNN's World Headquarters, this is Connect the World. Coming up, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are fierce competitors, but the two do share something in common. We take a look at their shared heritage as the sons of Cuban immigrants. And we're off to Barcelona to find out how the government is using technology to save precious natural resources. That's the digital state next.